The crash and the promise Mia's ship groaned as it plummeted through the sky, the atmosphere outside growing thicker and more turbulent with each passing second. Her heart raced as the control panel blinked red, flashing warnings of malfunction. She fought to keep the ship steady, but the pull of gravity was too strong. The ship jerked violently as it crashed through the trees, tearing apart with an explosive sound that filled her ears. She struggled to stay conscious, her body rattling inside the cockpit as debris flew around her. The smell of burning wires filled the air, and the world outside seemed to spin faster. Mia's head slammed against the side of her seat, and everything went black. When she finally opened her eyes, the world was a blur. The ship's wreckage lay around her in pieces, scattered across the rough terrain of an alien planet. Mia's body ached from the crash. Her legs felt like they were made of stone, and her arms were bruised and scratched. She tried to move, but pain shot through her, forcing her to stop. She looked around, trying to make sense of her surroundings. The sky was dim, and the trees above her were strange, their leaves glowing faintly in the twilight. She knew she needed to get out of the wreckage, but her body wasn't cooperating. The crash had taken everything out of her. Panic set in as she realized she was alone. Her distress beacon should have been activated, but the ship's systems were down. She had no way to call for help. Her mind raced, thinking of all the ways she could die out here lost on a foreign planet, no way to survive. She struggled to sit up, but the pain in her leg was unbearable. "Help," she whispered hoarsely, but there was no one around to hear her. She could barely keep her eyes open, the exhaustion from the crash weighing her down. That's when she heard the sound of footsteps. At first, she thought it was her mind playing tricks on her, but the footsteps grew louder. She tried to call out again, but her voice was too weak. She closed her eyes, hoping it was a dream, but when she opened them again, she saw a figure standing over her, a man. Tall, muscular, his face weathered from years of battle. He wore the standard military gear of the Galactic Defense Force, his uniform marked with the insignia of a seasoned soldier. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable. "I'm here to help you," he said, his voice calm, but with a hint of urgency. Mia wanted to protest. She wanted to tell him that she didn't need help, that she could do this on her own. But the words wouldn't come. She felt too weak, too tired. Instead, she simply stared at him, hoping he would understand. Man knelt down beside her, his movements smooth and practiced. "Can you move?" he asked. Mia tried to lift her leg but winced in pain. "No," she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't. I'm stuck." The man nodded, his expression softening. "It's okay. I'm going to get you out of here." He carefully checked her injuries, his hands gentle as he assessed her condition. "You're not going to die out here, not on my watch." His words were meant to be reassuring, but they only filled her with guilt. She wasn't worth this. She wasn't worth the trouble. The man didn't even know her, and yet he was willing to risk his life to save hers. She tried to push him away, to tell him he didn't have to do this. But the words wouldn't come. He stood up and, without hesitation, turned to the wreckage of the ship. The exoskeleton was there, a bulky suit designed for heavy lifting. He activated it with a simple command, and it hummed to life, its metallic frame clicking into place as the power surged through it. Mia watched him in silence, still too weak to say anything. She felt a surge of helplessness. "Please, just leave me," she whispered. "I'm not worth it. You can't waste your time on me. Go leave me here." The soldier paused for a moment, looking back at her. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, they both just stared. His gaze was unwavering, calm, as if he was making a promise without words. "I'm not leaving you behind," he said, his voice firm but compassionate. "I promised I'd get you out of here, and I will. Just hold on." With a smooth motion, he bent down and lifted her into his arms. The exoskeleton's power added strength to his muscles. making the act of carrying her seem effortless. Mia's body rested against his chest, her head leaning against his shoulder. She could feel the warmth of his body, the steady rhythm of his breathing, but there was no comfort in it. She felt like a burden, and the guilt crushed her. She wanted to tell him to stop, to let her go, but the words caught in her throat. She was afraid that if she spoke, he would hear the truth, that she didn't deserve his help. She closed her eyes instead, letting the darkness take her once more. As they began to move, the man's footsteps were steady and strong. Every step was a reminder of his determination to save her. Mia wanted to resist, to fight the weakness that had overtaken her, but she couldn't. Her body was too broken, too tired. For the next few hours, Mia was carried, her world spinning between flashes of consciousness and fading darkness. She heard the sounds of their journey, distant roars of alien creatures, the rustling of trees, and the soft hum of the exoskeleton as it moved through the landscape. Through it all, the man remained silent. He didn't speak to her again, but the promise in his eyes was enough. He would carry her for as long as it took. And Mia didn't know what to say to that. The long trek begins. The sky above them darkened as the day faded into a dull twilight. The air grew cooler, and the forest around them seemed to pulse with life. Mia's eyes flickered open for a moment, but the movement of the exoskeleton as it carried her through the thick underbrush made her dizzy. She tried to lift her head, but her body felt too heavy, as if the weight of her injuries was pulling her deeper into unconsciousness. She could feel the man's steady breathing against her skin, the warmth of his body a strange comfort as he moved through the alien landscape. The exoskeleton hummed softly, its power running through his limbs as it helped him carry her. Each step was strong and steady, yet Mia couldn't shake the feeling that she was nothing but a burden to him. She wanted to tell him to stop too. Leave her, but every time she tried, the words stuck in her throat. Her chest tightened as the thought weighed on her heart. He's risking his life for me, she thought, her mind racing. She wasn't worth it. She had only known pain and failure. She didn't deserve to be saved. The man's name was John. He had told her earlier, but her thoughts had been so clouded with confusion that she hadn't really processed it. John didn't seem to mind her silent pleas for him to stop, and he didn't ask for anything in return. His only focus was getting her to safety, no matter what it took. Mia's body tensed again as the path grew steeper, the ground uneven and filled with jagged rocks. She felt the strain in John's arms, the effort it took to keep her steady against the rough terrain. Still, he never faltered. His eyes stayed ahead, his gaze unwavering as he moved forward. Mia's eyes closed again, and she allowed herself to drift in and out of sleep. Every time she woke, the journey seemed to stretch on endlessly. Hours passed, and with each step, the landscape seemed to change. The trees were taller now, their twisted branches reaching out like fingers toward the sky. The wind had picked up, rustling the leaves above them and sending strange noises through the forest. But none of that mattered. Mia couldn't focus on the surroundings. All she could focus on was the man carrying her, his strength, his determination, and the overwhelming sense of guilt that weighed heavily on her chest. As they moved, Mia's thoughts turned to the exoskeleton that John wore. She had seen them before, powerful suits used by soldiers in battle to increase strength and speed. They were built for heavy lifting, for moving large objects, and for surviving in extreme conditions. John had activated the suit before lifting her, the mechanical frame working alongside his own muscles to help carry her. She could feel the vibrations in the suit, the hum of its systems as it powered him forward, but Mia couldn't help but think of how exhausting it must be to carry someone for so long. She tried to speak again, but her voice was barely a whisper. "John," she croaked, her throat dry from the crash and the exhaustion. You should let me go. I'm not worth it. You're going to tire yourself out." John didn't respond. Immediately, his focus entirely on the path ahead. Mia's heart sank. Maybe he couldn't hear her. Maybe he was too focused on his mission to listen to her pleas. She couldn't blame him. He was a soldier after all. He was trained to do this, to survive, but Mia wasn't like him. She wasn't strong. She wasn't a soldier. "I won't leave you," John finally said, his voice calm and steady. There was no trace of doubt in his tone. "You're not a burden. I'll carry you as long as it takes." Mia's heart twisted at his words. The quiet determination in his voice, the sincerity that laced every word. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that she wasn't just some weight dragging him down. But how could she? She had nothing to offer him in return. She was a stranger, someone he didn't even know. And yet, he was willing to risk everything for her. A part of her wanted to tell him to stop, to say that it wasn't fair for him to carry such a heavy load. But another part of her couldn't help but feel something else, something soft, something fragile. Hoped out. They continued to move through the dense forest, the exoskeleton's footfalls the only sound breaking the silence. The world around them felt so alien. The trees seemed like they were watching them, their strange shapes casting eerie shadows across the ground. The air smelled unfamiliar, like something wild, something untamed. Mia's head swam with exhaustion, her eyelids heavy, but she tried to stay awake, tried to be aware of her surroundings. And then, a sudden noise broke through the stillness. A low growl, followed by the sound of something heavy moving through the underbrush. Mia's heart leapt in her chest. What was that? John's pace didn't change, but Mia could feel his muscles tense as his grip on her tightened. He didn't speak, but she could tell he had heard it too. The growl came again, louder this time, followed by the sounds of feet crashing through the brush. Something was out there, something dangerous. Mia's breath caught in her throat. Are we going to die here? She felt John's body shift as he adjusted his hold on her. He moved faster now, his steps more deliberate. Hold on tight, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm not letting anything happen to you. Mia nodded weakly, her arms trembling as she gripped him tighter. The growling noise grew closer, and her heart pounded in her chest. They were being followed. The creatures on this planet were far more dangerous than anything she had ever faced back home. And now, she was trapped. Trapped in John's arms as they were pursued by something that could kill them both. John moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the trees around them. He kept the pace steady, moving as fast as he could without causing harm to Mia. Every now and then, he would glance over his shoulder, as if expecting something to leap from the shadows. Mia's heart raced. She couldn't see the creature, but she could feel the tension in the air. It was coming closer. Stay with me, John urged, his voice low and steady. Mia didn't have the strength to speak. All she could do was hold on and trust him. Trust that he would get them out of this. Trust him to keep his promise. And as the growling grew louder, Mia couldn't help but wonder, would John's strength be enough to get them through this? The fight for survival, the sounds of the creature chasing them grew louder. Mia could feel the tension in the air as John moved faster, his grip on her tightening. The growling seemed to echo through the trees, and every step John took felt like it was made with more urgency. She could feel the vibrations in the exoskeleton as John pushed forward, but the creature wasn't far behind. Mia's heart raced. In her chest, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Her mind was a blur of fear and confusion. What was that thing? The growl that had followed them sounded like it belonged to something massive, something predatory. The kind of creature that hunted without mercy. She could feel her pulse pounding in her throat, and her head spun with dizziness. She had no idea how long they had been running, or how much further they had to go, but it didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was survival. John's eyes flicked to the side, his movements precise and calculated. He didn't show any signs of fear, only a determination that Mia could feel through his every step. He wasn't going to let anything happen to her, but Mia could see the strain in his body. The exoskeleton was powerful, yes, but carrying someone for this long was taking its toll. She could feel the tremors in his muscles, the slight falter in his step as exhaustion crept in. She wanted to say something, to tell him to stop, but the words wouldn't come. Why was he doing this? Why was he putting himself through so much? For someone like her? The questions swirled in her mind, but there was no time for answers. The growl of the creature was now so close she could feel it vibrating in her bones. John's pace didn't slow. He pushed forward with everything he had, his jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed with focus. Mia could feel the sweat on his skin, his breath steady but strained. He wasn't showing it, but Mia knew he was at the limit of his strength. She wanted to help him, to ease the burden he carried. But she couldn't. She was too weak. She was nothing but a passenger, a weight that only made his task harder. They reached a clearing, and for a moment, the growl of the creature seemed to fade. John paused, his eyes scanning the area. Mia couldn't see much, but she could feel the tension in the air. They were vulnerable now, exposed in the open. The creature could be anywhere. John moved to the side, pressing Mia's body closer to his chest as he crouched down behind a large rock. His exoskeleton groaned under the strain, but it held steady. Mia felt her heart pounding in her chest as she pressed her head against his shoulder, her body trembling with fear. She could barely keep her eyes open, the exhaustion pulling at her with each passing moment. She had never been so scared in her life. For a moment, everything was still. The wind rustled the leaves in the trees, and the distant sound of the creature's growl faded into silence. John remained still, his body tense as he waited, his grip on Mia never loosening. The air was thick with anticipation. Mia could hear her own breathing, loud and fast in the quiet of the clearing. Suddenly, the creature's growl pierced the silence again, louder than before. It was close. Too close. Mia's stomach dropped, and she instinctively held her breath, waiting for whatever came next. John's voice broke the silence. "Stay quiet," he whispered, his tone urgent. "We'll be fine. Just stay still." Mia nodded weakly, but fear gripped her chest. How would they survive this? She had seen the speed and strength of the creature, and she knew they didn't stand a chance if it got too close. They had to keep moving, keep running. But where? The jungle stretched on endlessly, a maze of trees and shadows that offered no safe escape. John's gaze flicked toward the trees, his eyes narrowing as he watched for any signs of movement. His mind was working quickly, calculating their next move. Mia could feel the tension in his muscles, the way his body was ready to spring into action. But she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. He was barely hanging on, and it was clear that the exoskeleton wasn't going to be enough to carry them both much longer. The growl of the creature came again, louder and closer than before. John's eyes flicked to the side, and Mia saw the flash of determination in his gaze. He was going to fight. Without warning, he stood up, his exoskeleton whirring to life as he activated the suit's combat mode. Mia's heart skipped a beat as she realized what he was planning to do. He wasn't going to run anymore. He was going to face whatever this creature was head-on. "Hold on," John said, his voice low and steady. He adjusted his grip on Mia and moved forward, walking into the clearing with purpose. Mia's heart raced, and for the first time since the crash, she spoke, her voice trembling. "John, you can't. You'll never make it." But John didn't stop. His eyes were locked on the shadows beyond the clearing, his entire body tensed for action. The creature had to be close, but John didn't show fear. His focus was on the threat ahead, the knowledge that he had to protect her no matter what. The creature emerged from the trees, its massive form a blur of movement. It was unlike anything Mia had ever seen. Its eyes glowed with an eerie yellow light, its sharp claws scraping the ground as it moved toward them. Mia's breath caught in her throat as she saw its teeth, jagged and deadly, glinting in the fading light, but John didn't hesitate. He raised his arm, the exoskeleton's reinforced hand locking into place as he prepared to strike. The creature lunged, and with a roar, John met it head-on, his exoskeleton's enhanced strength driving his fist into the creature's side. The impact was brutal, and the creature recoiled, momentarily stunned. John took a step back, his stance firm as he readied himself for the next attack. Mia could see the strain on his face, the sweat pouring from his brow, but he didn't give up. He couldn't. Not when Mia's life was at stake. The creature lunged again, but this time, John was ready. He dodged its strike, moving with the exoskeleton's enhanced agility. He swung again, his fist connecting with the creature's head. The force of the blow sent it reeling backward, dazed. Mia could barely watch as John fought, each movement a dance of survival. The creature was powerful, but John was determined. His strength, combined with the power of the exoskeleton, gave him the edge he needed. It wasn't enough to defeat the creature completely, but it was enough to drive it back, with a final roar. The creature retreated into the trees, disappearing back into the shadows. John stood still for a moment, breathing heavily, his body trembling from exhaustion. Mia's heart was still racing in her chest as she watched him. He had done it. He had protected them. But at what cost? John lowered his arms, his eyes filled with a mix of exhaustion and relief. He glanced at Mia, his face pale but resolute. "We have to keep moving," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's no time to rest." Mia nodded, her body trembling as she clung to him. They weren't safe yet, but for now, they had survived. The breaking point. The sky was now a deep shade of purple as the last of the daylight faded away. The air was cold, and Mia could feel the chill seeping through her clothes. She was still in John's arms, her body exhausted and broken from the crash, the strain of the journey, and the constant threat of the creature that had chased them. Every movement felt like a weight, her body too tired to fight the weariness. But she couldn't give in. Not yet. John's movements were slower now. She could feel the tremor in his grip, the slight stagger in his steps as he carried her across the rough terrain. The exoskeleton was still functional, its powerful frame carrying both him and her, but Mia could see that it was taking a toll on him. The suit had been built for heavy lifting, for battle, for endurance, but no machine could replace the exhaustion of a human body pushing itself too far. They had been walking for hours, the night stretching on endlessly. John hadn't said a word since they had fought off the creature. There was no time for words. The only thing that mattered now was survival. But as the minutes dragged on, Mia couldn't help but feel the heavy weight of their situation. How much longer could they keep going? She could see the strain on John's face, the way his jaw clenched with every step, the sweat on his brow despite the cold. He wasn't saying anything, but she could feel the exhaustion radiating from him. The exoskeleton was built for strength, but it wasn't meant for endless movement across a hostile world. It wasn't meant to carry someone for days on end. Mia wanted to say something, to ask him to stop, but she couldn't bring herself to. She had asked him before, pleaded with him to leave her behind, but he had refused. And now, as she looked at him, she knew it was more than just his strength that kept him going. It was something deeper, something she couldn't quite put into words, his determination, his promise, but even John had limits. She could see it. In his eyes, his shoulders were slumped and his breathing was labored. The exoskeleton was groaning under the strain, the suit's systems flickering in protest. They were both at the breaking point, and Mia knew that it wasn't just the suit that would fail. It was John. John. Mia whispered, her voice weak. "You need to stop. You need to rest." John didn't respond immediately. He kept walking, his eyes fixed ahead. The silence between them was heavy, filled with the unspoken tension of their shared struggle. Mia felt the weight of his body, shifting slightly as he adjusted her in his arms. The exoskeleton's movements were smooth, but Mia could sense the struggle beneath the surface. John was fighting to keep going, but Mia could see that his strength was fading. "We don't have time for rest," John said finally, his voice strained but firm. "We're too far from shelter. We have to keep moving." Mia could hear the desperation in his tone, and it broke her heart. He was pushing himself beyond his limits. He was trying to save her, and in doing so, he was hurting himself. Mia's chest tightened as she realized just how much he had sacrificed for her. "John," she said softly, "please, just rest. You've been carrying me for days. You can't keep going like this." But John didn't stop. He kept walking, his eyes never wavering from the path ahead. Mia's heart sank as she realized that he wasn't going to listen. He wasn't going to give up on her, no matter how much it hurt him. And that thought, the thought that he cared enough to keep going, filled her with guilt. She felt the sudden wave of weakness hit her again, and she clutched him tighter, her vision swimming. Her body was fading, and she knew she couldn't keep holding on forever. She had seen what he had done to protect her. He had fought off the creature without a second thought. He had carried her through the jungle, never once complaining, never once asking for rest. And now she was the one who was slowing him down. She was the one who was putting him at risk, but she couldn't help it. She couldn't stop the pain in her body, the fatigue that pulled her deeper into unconsciousness. Her head swam with dizziness, and she could feel herself slipping away again. John's voice broke through the haze of exhaustion. "We're almost there," he said, his words more for himself than for her. "Just a little longer." Mia wanted to respond, to tell him that it was okay to stop, that he didn't have to carry her anymore. But the words wouldn't come. She was too weak. Her body was too broken. The darkness was closing in again. And then, just as she thought she couldn't hold on any longer, John stumbled. His foot caught on a rock, and for a split second, the world seemed to slow down. Mia felt herself slipping from his grip, but before she could fully lose her balance, John reached out, his arm tightening around her waist. He caught himself, his body trembling with effort. "I'm okay," he said, more to himself than to her. "I'm fine. We can keep going." But Mia could see the truth in his eyes. He wasn't fine. He was running on empty, pushing himself past the point of no return. And if they didn't find shelter soon, it wouldn't just be his body that failed. It would be everything. The exoskeleton let out a soft warning sound, its systems flickering as they struggled to keep up with the strain. John's movements became slower, more deliberate. He was still carrying Mia, but the suit was starting to show signs of wear. The weight was too much, the systems too taxed. Mia reached up, her hand trembling as she touched his shoulder. "John," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm sorry. I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done." John turned his head slightly, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he looked at her. His eyes were tired, but there was a softness in them, a calmness that she hadn't seen before. "There's nothing to thank me for," he said quietly. "It's my job. I'm here to protect you." The sincerity in his voice made Mia's heart ache. She had never met anyone like him, someone who would sacrifice everything for the sake of another. It was a level of selflessness she couldn't comprehend. As they continued walking, the weight of their situation settled in. They weren't going to make it on their own. Not if they kept going like this. But Mia could see that John wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. They had to keep going. For each other, the final push and the promise fulfilled, the hours seemed to stretch endlessly as Mia was carried across the rugged terrain. The cold had seeped deeper into her bones, and her body was on the edge of giving up. John's grip on her never wavered, but Mia could feel the weight of his struggle in every step he took. She could hear the faint hum of the exoskeleton as it pushed through its limits, the systems groaning under the strain. It wasn't designed to carry someone this far, for this long. Yet John kept moving forward, his eyes fixed on the horizon, as if there was some invisible force pushing him, forcing him to continue. Mia wanted to tell him to stop, to rest, but every time she opened her mouth, the words wouldn't come. She couldn't bear to see him push himself further into exhaustion. She had already seen him fight off that creature, move through hours of treacherous terrain without complaint. Why? Why did he keep going? The answer was simple, yet it was the hardest truth to accept. He wasn't just carrying her because it was his duty. He wasn't just doing it because of the exoskeleton or his training. He was doing it because, for some reason, he had decided she was worth it. And that thought, the thought that someone like him, so strong and capable, was willing to risk everything for someone like her, made her chest tighten. Mia had never been good at accepting help. She had always been the one to handle things on her own, never relying on anyone. But this man, this soldier, had forced her to see a different side of the world. A side where people helped each other, where sacrifice wasn't about obligation, but about something deeper. John paused for a moment, and for the first time, Mia could feel the weight of his exhaustion. His breath came in shallow gasps, and his body was trembling slightly from the strain. He took a moment to adjust the exoskeleton systems, trying to keep it running smoothly. Mia could feel his heartbeat through the warmth of his chest, steady but slowing. "We're almost there," he said quietly, though his voice lacked its usual strength. "Just a little bit longer." Mia could see the truth in his eyes. They had been walking for days, carrying each other through this unforgiving landscape, and now they were so close. The shelter they had been aiming for was within reach, but the distance between them and safety felt like an eternity. Mia's heart raced at the thought of it. What if they didn't make it? What if John didn't make it? John, she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, you need to stop." He didn't respond immediately, but she could feel the shift in his body. He wasn't sure whether he could keep going. The exoskeleton's power was running low, and it was only a matter of time before the systems would fail. "We don't have a choice," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "We have to keep moving." Mia's heart ached as she watched him struggle. He was on the brink of collapse, but he was still holding on, still carrying her, still fighting to survive. She wanted to scream at him to stop, to tell him that it was okay, that he had done enough. But she couldn't. She could see that for him, stopping wasn't an option. He had made a promise to her, and he wasn't about to break it. "I can't." John's voice broke slightly, and for the first time, Mia saw a crack in his tough exterior. His shoulders sagged as the exoskeleton let out a soft warning sound. "I can't keep carrying you, Mia." Mia looked up at him, her eyes filled with both fear and something else. Hope that they had come so far, and yet, the end still seemed so far out of reach. Mia could feel the tears welling up in her eyes as she whispered the words she had been holding in. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice soft. "I'm sorry for everything. For making you carry me all this way. You don't deserve this." John's grip on her tightened, and he shifted her in his arms. He didn't say anything for a long time, and Mia was sure he was too exhausted to even speak. But then, finally, he looked down at her, his eyes full of understanding. "Mia," he said, gently, "you don't have to apologize. I'm not carrying you because I have to. I'm carrying you because I promised, and I don't break my promises." His words hit her like a wave, and Mia felt something shift inside her. She had always believed that the world was a place where people took care of themselves and didn't rely on others. But John had shown her a different kind of strength, one built on compassion, not just physical power. And for the first time, Mia realized she didn't have to carry the world on her shoulders alone. There were people who would help, people who cared enough to sacrifice their own comfort and safety for someone else. John cared. John took another step forward, his movements slow but steady. The path ahead was narrow and treacherous, but they were so close now. The shelter was just a few hundred yards away. Mia could see it through the trees, a small clearing with a building in the distance, glowing faintly in the dim light. The warmth of the shelter, the promise of safety, was within reach. And yet, as they moved closer, John's steps faltered again. He was pushing himself past the point of no return. Mia could see the strain in his face, the beads of sweat rolling down his forehead. His body was giving out, and the exoskeleton systems were starting to fail. But then, in that moment, Mia did something she hadn't done in days. She pushed herself up from his arms. Despite the pain in her body, despite the exhaustion that threatened to overtake her, she placed her hands on his shoulders and gently urged him to stop. "We're almost there," she said, her voice firm but filled with emotion. "Let me help." John's eyes widened in surprise, but he didn't argue. For the first time, he let her take some of the weight, let her push herself even though she was barely able to stand. And together, they moved forward. It was the final push, the last stretch. And as they reached the shelter, Mia felt a sense of relief wash over her. They had made it. She had made it. John stumbled as they crossed into the shelter, his exoskeleton finally giving out. They both collapsed to the ground, breathless and exhausted. Mia looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and something deeper, something she couldn't fully understand. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Thank you for carrying me all this way." John smiled weakly, his eyes closing as he let out a long breath. "I told you, I don't break my promises." And for the first time, Mia truly believed him.